Investigation into a lawsuit claiming the NFL uses race as a factor in determining which former players are compensated for head injuries. Ryan Smith has the exclusive report.
Former defensive lineman Kevin Henry played 8 seasons for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Stop by Kevin Henry.
Now, he says he's battling memory loss, headaches, depression, and bouts of anger. All symptoms of what he suspects are the long-term effects of the head injuries he sustained on the field.
Football doesn't give you an expiration date. You just expire. I've had 10 concussions or more. I've had at least 17 surgeries. 17. And I'm still getting them.
In 2017, a neurologist determined that Henry was suffering from a cognitive decline consistent with mild dementia. So Henry submitted a claim to the landmark 2013 NFL concussion settlement program, which paid eligible former players suffering from the effects of head injuries.
What was the result of the claim you filed?
I was denied, and we're asked to function in our daily lives like normal human beings.
In its rejection of Henry's claim, the claims administrator questioned whether his performance on the test was valid and asserted that the doctor used inappropriate norms. 2 years later, Henry went in for another evaluation with a neuropsychologist. Now, this clinician used an NFL-recommended formula that took into account age, gender, education, and race, and concluded that Henry did not qualify for compensation.
How did you react when you learned that there was a different standard being used for black players to get benefits as compared to white players?
I felt so betrayed, and I still feel that way. 2 different systems? How can that be okay? Why should that be okay?
It's a controversial practice commonly known as race norming. In medicine, it's supposed to help doctors make better diagnoses by using race to make assumptions about a patient's background. But critics say it is not an accurate tool and has no place in the settlement program.
Well, the effect of using this race norm for the NFL is that it drastically limits the amount of damages they're going to have to pay out. It's almost the classic definition of racial discrimination, using race as a basis of denying benefits to a disadvantaged or subordinated group because of race.
And now, in a lawsuit, Henry and another former player are accusing the NFL of avoiding paying head injury claims based on a formula that requires race norming. They say the practice is discriminatory because it assumes black players start at a lower cognitive level than white players, and that makes it harder for black former players to qualify for compensation.
I just want to be looked at the same way as a white guy. We went out together and we played hard together. It wasn't no white or black thing. We lost together, we won together.
Whenever a clinician, a neuropsychologist, tries to use something other than black norms for black players, white norms for white players, the NFL has consistently attacked those clinicians because they haven't used those black norms for black players.
Explosive emails exclusively obtained by ABC News appear to show multiple clinicians agreeing with that assessment. Several neuropsychologists who work with the NFL privately discussing the lawsuit, saying they feel that factoring for race was all but required under the program. One saying if they didn't use the racial norms, there would be multiple inquiries levied at them. Another saying their required reliance on racial norms, bottom line, do discriminate against black players. In a statement to ABC News, the NFL calls the lawsuit entirely misguided. The league says that the race norming, part of what they call demographic correction, is recommended but not required. And the concussion settlement was agreed to by all parties with the assistance of expert neuropsychological clinicians, and it relies on widely accepted and long-established testing and scoring methods.
When you hear the NFL say, we stand against social injustice, we stand against racism, that Black Lives Matter, what do you think?
Liars. They're liars, man. It sounds great, don't it? We stand with you. Boy, that sounds good.
We want to break this down a little further now, and we're lucky to have Ryan Smith with us live, along with emergency physician and ABC News medical contributor, Dr. Darian Sutton. Thank you both for being here. Ryan, can you start us off by just explaining a little bit more about how these doctors say this race norming worked and what that formula was that they say they were supposed to follow?
Sure. Diane, part of this deals with how the concussion settlement is handled. Essentially, if a player is retired or a former player says they've suffered some sort of head injury as a result of playing on the field, they go see a neuropsychologist. And that neuropsychologist evaluates their claim, makes a recommendation to a claims administrator, and then that administrator decides whether or not they're entitled to compensation or not. The NFL can appeal that decision. The way this works is if a player goes to see a neuropsychologist, if that's a black player, the neuropsychologist, according to the NFL, has the option of using race as sort of a factor in deciding it, essentially saying that before they even started playing football, they had a lower cognitive level than white players. And so, in a way, they have a greater degree that they have to prove to show that they're entitled to compensation. Now, what these doctors are saying is it wasn't an option. It was required. The NFL expected doctors to use that. And the effect is that some of the players filing the lawsuits looked like they were going to get compensation and actually did in one case get compensation. But once the NFL appealed and the race norms were applied, that claim was denied.
Dr. Sutton, is racial norming, this kind of thing, is this something that you've seen while practicing medicine or during your training?
Well, the short answer is yes. Race norming is sometimes intrinsically put in place in many different medical cases and treatment and analysis in order to accommodate and help treat patients who would otherwise not receive that care. But in this case, it seems to be utilized in order to disqualify patients from care, and that obviously is a huge problem.
And Dr. Sutton, the history of intelligence testing, cognitive testing, is littered with bias and controversy. There's no proof at the end of the day that there's something that's biologically locatable, identifiable, measurable, quantifiable, called human intelligence, as opposed to something much more complex. Are you surprised that at this date, in 2021, people are still using intelligence tests, cognitive tests, to distinguish people on the basis of race and punish them when they make a claim for reparations for injuries?
I'm not surprised. As I said, there are many different examples that I can find race norming inside of risk stratifying scores in studies and medical testing, which does not help patients who need it. And that's where the problem is exposed. And we as providers and clinicians, we adjust those norms and those regulations and those rates in order to treat the patients that need the treatment that is indicated. Unfortunately, it seems like there is a second player outside of the clinical treatment here that is trying to use these norms in order to help benefit them, and that is a real big problem.
And Ryan, so where are the players? First, this is a great report. Thanks very much for doing this. It's really powerful. So where do these players stand now? What are they hoping to accomplish with this lawsuit, aside from bringing this to our attention?
So right now, Terry, this is in federal court. It's up for a judge is deciding whether or not or what to do about a motion to dismiss. So we'll see where that goes. If he rules in favor of that, this could actually be dismissed as a lawsuit. But if not, it goes on. But you mentioned awareness. I think that's really important. And Dr. Sutton touched on something very key there. The race norming itself, on its face, when you hear it, it sounds despicable. Part of the idea of it, though, is to help analyze the claim. And the NFL has made the point that, hey, this process, the process we use to evaluate settlements, has been federally approved in a federal court when we came up with the settlement. But it appears that in this case, if you look at the players' lawsuit, that somewhere along the line something got altered, something got changed. And what may have been at one point a tool to help understand the claims started being used as a bit of a hammer, at least according to these players' claims, to say, hey, if we apply this, we're going to say that they're on different levels. And that means they're going to have to prove more. Now, when you consider that the league is 70% black, this has enormous implications because we don't know the demographic data of how the settlements have been paid out. So there is a very real chance that there are a number of people besides these two men filing the lawsuit who have in some ways had this formula used against them and possibly had compensation denied because of it.
And we know the NFL has not provided that kind of demographic data to you. But Dr. Sutton, I'm curious, do you think that this case could have a larger impact on how race norming is used and shed some light on the issue of discrimination in medicine in general?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that it does, and it already has effect on many different patients. Specifically regards to this, when using a crude adjustment value of the isolated value of race and not including the other systemic and structural effects that cause racial disparities, you will lead to further inequities within patients. And that is likely what we're seeing here. What we know is that repetitive concussions can lead to long-term chronic effects and signs of early dementia. And these race norms and this isolated use of race as a factor would likely leave many Black patients not diagnosed appropriately and disqualifying them from care and appropriate treatment.
And Ryan, this suit, this story that you're bringing us comes at a time, when the NFL has been challenged by Colin Kaepernick and the movement that he has started, and by the call now for more executives, more coaches, people of color in those roles as well. So the issue of racism front and center, and this issue of head injuries. How do you think the league is responding, given the pressure they're under to this suit and this cause?
Well, right now, Terry, they're fighting it and saying this is more about a settlement agreement that we agreed to and trying to impose that settlement. But you bring up a great point, because this is about a larger issue. If you recall, after the strife in this country around racial injustice last year, NFL players, current players, challenged the NFL to say that Black Lives Matter, to sort of back causes that they believe in. And the NFL agreed, and they supported that. And I got to tell you, Terry, that was one of the first things these players wanted to talk to me about when I sat down with them. They said, if Black Lives Matter, then why use a system that even on its face, why even consider a system that even before you even look at the claim assumes that Black players have a lower cognitive level even before they step on the field for their first game than white players? I think that presents a real problem for the NFL, because I get it that you might have agreed to some framework of a settlement in federal court years ago, but somewhere along the line, there are doctors that feel that they have to use this formula. And as long as that is the case, this could be a problem for the NFL when they are at the same time saying to Black players across the league, we believe in you, we believe you're equals, and we believe that Black lives matter.
Ryan Smith and Dr. Darian Sutton, such an important conversation, and one we will continue, no doubt. Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.